Hi there. Welcome back to Tuesday's Tips. I'm Greg Kaiser, and this is our weekly feature where we're talking about image editing using Lightroom specifically, but pretty much everything I'm covering should apply some way, shape, or form to other image editors out there. So regardless of what you're using, I think the concepts here will apply to you. And this is by no means an exhaustive set of tips for this. I'm just really trying to give everybody an introductory leg up into Lightroom so that if you're just starting your photographic journey, or maybe you're just now getting into image editing, you've got a good resource that kind of takes you from the beginning and kind of works you through what is possible, so you can then develop your own style and do things the way that you want them done. I remember when I first got started with photography and tried Photoshop and just completely realized I was in over my head, didn't understand what was going on. Of course, this was back before YouTube was as prevalent as it is now. So there wasn't a real easy way of learning Photoshop. So I ended up kind of halfway doing edits until I found Lightroom, and Lightroom just made a whole lot of sense to me, and I found it's a very intuitive program. So that's what I'm trying to impart, just get a little bit of help for those that are just kind of getting started with image editing. And we've been looking most recently at the local edits using masks, and this week is no different. I had wanted to start getting into the brush mask, but honestly, that one is a little more complex in a lot of ways because it's more of a supporting mask and it's more of a blending mask than anything else, and I really want to try to figure out a very concise way of going through that one. So we're going to skip that one this week, and I've chosen to go through the range masks this time, and that is two different masks, but I use them a lot the same way, so that's why I'm kind of putting them in together. It's going to be the color range and the luminosity range mask, and I'll get into more detail obviously, but the color range mask is basically you can select a color within your photograph and then mask based on that color. It can be used as a standalone mask, or it can be used in unison with another, which honestly is the way that I prefer to use it. The other one is the luminosity mask, which basically works the same way, but instead of picking a color, it's picking a brightness. And it can be as broad a brightness or as small a brightness as you want it to be. So we're going to look at that and just kind of see some of the options that we have and some of the times that you might want to use that mask. And again, this is not an exhausted list. There's always different ways of using these masks and always different combinations and always different things you can do once you get the mask in place. So let your own creativity kind of guide what you want to do with these masks. But I'm going to go ahead and let's get you into Lightroom. And we're going to start off with this picture here, and this is one that I actually just shot yesterday. It's one of some rust, and it was done as an abstract piece. And it's one that I like for the textures and the color contrasts, but it's a really good one to show what the different range masks can do. This is one of two we'll be talking about today. So I've taken all the masks off of this. This is a virtual copy that I've created. So it's got all of the basic edits done, and you can see I've done stuff in the basic tab, color calibration, color mixer, tone curve, no color grading, the detail tab, didn't add any vignettes or anything, no need for any transform and standard lens correction. So it's had a basic edit done, and now we're going to get into masks. And one of the masks that I did use on this one when I did the final was a range mask. So if you go in and press the mask button, which is the little disc here, it's going to pop up this original box that has the different ones. We've covered most everything. Again, we're going to deal with brush at another time. But this is found under the range mask, and you see the little arrow here, so we can open this up and you have the option of color range and luminance range. There's also a depth range. My camera does not have this function. I've yet to use or see a camera that has the depth range, but essentially you can tell it to, make a mask based on where it is in distance from the camera. That would be very helpful and useful for especially landscape photographers. But I don't have the ability for that. I've never used it, so I can't really offer a whole lot of suggestions on how this works. But we've got a color range and a luminance range. So looking at this picture, we can do either one. For simplicity, I'm going to start off with a color range because we have a big discrepancy here between the rust color and the paint color. So let's go ahead, click color range. It's going to come up with new mask here. Now, one of the first things that you're going to notice is nothing is masked out as of yet. It's not an AI mask. It doesn't know what you're thinking. So you have to go on here and you've got the little medicine dropper. So you find an area and you can do it as a single press with the left key or left button on your mouse, or you can do a press and drag, which I'm going to do this time because I want to capture all the different reds and oranges that are in here. So I'm going to left click and I'm going to drag, and you see where it's opening this box. So I'm going to sample all of that, and now you see it comes up with this mask that includes those tones. It's got a little bit of the glare here, but it's a feathered mask. You can tell because it's not as heavy duty as, say, right in here. But you can refine this mask even more. And if you go up here to the top, and it's got a reminder, your color range is this sampled color right here. And it's that kind of reddish orange color. And we've got a refine slider here that's already in the middle. So we can go to the left, and you see that refines it a little bit more precisely, and that area where the glare was becomes less of an issue. We can go the other direction and we can include more. So we can go pretty much to the whole picture with the darkest areas just kind of feathered. Or we can go to a very hard mask with just those colors. As I mentioned kind of repeatedly through these tutorials, I like a certain amount of feather to my effects. If I can do a mask and make it look more gradual, it makes it look more natural, and the viewer is less likely to look at it and say, oh, I see what you did there. So I'm okay having a little bit of feather along here, so I might refine this to a point where I get a little bit more of that feather. If this bothers me, before I even start to mess with anything, I can go up here and do subtract. We're going to do a brush tool. And again, this is a very multifaceted tool that does a lot of different things. But for this, I'm going to use my B brush, which has 100% flow. So I can come and just eliminate this mask from this area completely. There's no auto mask needed. I don't have to build the effect. It's just one swipe, that's gone. So that's a real easy way of doing that. So now our mask is just over these areas that are rust toned. So at this point, I can do things like brighten it up just a little bit. Maybe I want to increase the saturation. Of course, I'm going a little overboard so you can see the effect on your screens. This is not how I actually edited this image, just showing you some things that we can do. Because we are dealing with colors, we can also go in and do this little letterbox down here next to color, and this is going to bring this up. So we can change hue and saturation here if we wanted to do that. And you see there's a different range of things that we can do with this, and depending on what your output desire is, this may work for you. I don't particularly like it here, so I'm going to go up here, left click on that original color, takes that away. I'm going to X out of that box. But I can come down here to, let's do point color first, because this is a new addition in Lightroom. I think from back in December. We can do the targeted adjustment tool or a color picker and say I want to really bring this red out. So I'm going to click here on the red, and I want to visualize that range. So what's in color is going to be affected. So now it's just going to be these areas. And again, we have another range mask that we can adjust how much of that we're going to do. And I just want to hit these highlight red parts. So we're going to uncheck the range here, and we're going to bring the saturation up. And that's just really affecting that very fine line of red. And I can make it a little bit more red, or I can bring it more to orange. So again, we season to taste. So let's say that's where I want it right there. So that's using the point color. Now we can also come down here into the tone curve, and we can hit the color tone curves. And let's say I want to add more red here. And remember, we are still just in that mask that is based on the color range. So we're doing all this stuff just on the rust, which means we can come down here, we can add clarity just to the rust, a little bit of texture just to the rust, all because we identified this mask, which is what's in green. We're not doing anything to these darker areas. So without the mask, we can go up, we can click this eyeball. That's what we started with. With this color range mask, that's what we've ended up with. So say we like that, and now we want to do everything that isn't this mask. Well, remember, you can come up here to this little 3 dots here, come down here, duplicate, and invert. So it's going to give us the same masking, but it's going to be the inverse. And because we added this brush, I want to delete brush 1 off of there. So now we've got mask 1 inverted. I don't know why it gave me brush 1 copy. Maybe I hit duplicate. Trying to do this and talking through it at the same time is not the easiest thing. So we're going to delete those 2 brushes. Now we've got just a straight inverted mask that covers all of this. So what do we want to do here? Maybe we want to pull the color out of that just a little bit, make it look a little bit more black. We'll come over here, hover over that arrow. Let's see where the exact black point is. So we're going to left click on that so it keeps these little blue warnings as clipping warnings. So let's bring the exposure down just a little bit. I want more pure black in here. Again, not how I edited it, but for sake of argument. So now we've got that there. We've desaturated, we've made it more black. So let's go over here, create new mask. We're going to go down to the range masks, which in this version has everything listed individually. Color and luminance are separated. So let's try to grab these areas here. So let's do a luminance range. And let's go ahead and do the same thing. We are going to left click and drag across a range of luminance values. And now we've picked this up and some of the lighter areas of the rust. So we can go in and let's just say we're going to boost the saturation here just a little bit. And we're starting to get a little bit too much into this, so let's try to subtract a color range. And let's just go with the, let's go with an orange tone. And we're going to subtract that. And let's see what that leaves us with. Okay, now we are dealing more with just those lighter areas. So now we can add a little bit of warmth into them to make them kind of go along with the rust. If that's not enough, we can come down here to this letterbox with color and hue, and you see we can make huge difference here with the hue and saturation. Let's see. Let's go with a little bit more of a yellow tone, but I want to bring the saturation up. So something like that. That works. So we're going to do that, and let's see what these little trailing areas are. If we take that eyeball, you see how we've managed to bring that color in. Now again, seasoned to taste, this is not how I ultimately edited this picture. This is just for conversation's sake. So that's the way that we can identify this. And when you start getting into the luminance range, up here at the top, we're going to see this. This is what we can refine this with. What we've got a box. This is showing what is being affected. And just like the histogram, it's all the way over to the right. So it's just those really, really bright values. But this is a feather. And if we take this arrow right here, we can adjust the feather ever so slightly so we can fine tune where that transition point is. Now, I'm going to show you a different way of doing this, and we've hit on this before. In fact, we covered it specifically with luminosity range and dealing with dodging and burning the easy way. But here, let's go down here and hit luminance range. I'm not going to take the color picker and pick anything at this point. I'm going to manually select it. So I want to get the brighter areas. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it over, and you see what my mask is doing. It's eliminating those areas that are totally black to begin with. And as I move over, that feather arrow comes with us. So it kind of gives us a natural feather. And we can kind of go to the point where, okay, that's about where I would want it. So I've got, what about the top 25% of values, and up on the histogram it's going to be these areas that are affected, and then the next 25%, breaking it into about the top half, is going to be feather. And you see what's going on here. We're going to be affecting these areas that are lighter and this glare. So I can go ahead and bring that up, and this essentially is dodging. It's brightening part of the image. So we call that one dodging, but you see where that mask is, and it's all based on luminosity. You don't have to do anything complex or convoluted to get here. You just use a luminosity mask. Now, the other end of that, we can do a new mask, luminosity range, manually adjust, but this time we're going to bring the highlights out, and we are going to just adjust the darkest points. So something about like that, and we can bring the feather in, something like that, and then we can bring the exposure down. Of course, I've already got the exposure down beyond where I'd want it, but we can do it even further here. This would be burning, but it really doesn't make a difference in this situation. As we do the eyeball on and off, everything that is going to be pretty much black has already been taken care of, and I did that with the invert, or duplicated invert off of the color range. So we don't need that one, so we can go ahead and delete mask 4. But this kind of shows you how this can work in an overall quality and overall picture, because we have very distinctive dark versus light and orange tones versus this would be a blue tone. So it makes it real easy to do these masks straight off the bat. The other option that I want to go to is one that's not as easy to determine. And this is another one that I shot yesterday. Different car, different location. But there's a lot going on here, and I ended up doing quite a many masks on this one to get things the way that I wanted. Used a lot of radials, used a lot of linear gradients. But what I want to show here is how these color ranges and luminosity ranges can really help. when you add them in with another one. And to start off with, I want to deal with this sky. It was a little brighter than I wanted it to be. I didn't have the time to run back and grab a grad filter. I would have put probably a 2-stop soft grad on here just to darken the sky a little bit. I wasn't able to do that just because of time constraints. I was waiting for the sun to do exactly what I wanted it to do, and I didn't want to miss that trying to get a filter. So after doing our basic edit, and we've covered everything here except for color grading. I didn't transform anything, and there's no lens blur, but everything else I've touched one way or another to get to this basic edit. So now one of the first things I see that I want to deal with is the sky. And remember, I am not a fan of doing select sky to start with, because if we do select sky, this is what's going to happen. Gives it a second, and here we go. So now we've got this real hard division here. If I were to go in here, darken the sky down, it starts to look to me a little funky here at the horizon. This should be brighter, and it looks like I just threw in a sky, did sky replacement. That's not what I want. So we're going to delete mask 1, and instead we're going to come up here and we're going to do a linear gradient. And we're going to start it about here. We're going to press shift on the keyboard, and all of this has been covered in the linear gradient, so I suggest you go back and check that out if any of this is new to you. And what we're doing is we are creating a feather right here in the sky. Now what we can do, we can go up here, hit Alt or Option on a Mac. When you're hovering over Add and Subtract, that's going to give us intersect. I want to intersect this with select sky, because I know that it's going to do a good job of getting rid of the tree there. There's a little bit of blending here on the top of the barn. I could easily brush that out, but since it's reflecting the sky, I actually ended up leaving that. But here's where I want to really show you the power of what we're dealing with here, because I want to keep the clouds as white as possible. So we're going to come back up and we are going to intersect again. So Alt or Option, intersect, and I want to do a color range. And I want to hit the blue. And now I want to refine this, because remember, we can adjust how this works, and by bringing that to the left, you can see in the mask how the clouds are really no longer a part of this mask anymore. There's a little bit of feathering going on with them, but not much. The effect is now in the blue up here, and it starts to fade out right here. The end result, we start to bring our exposure down. We're deepening the blues, but you see how the clouds are staying where they are. The reason they're doing that is because I have intersected this mask both with the sky, so it's eliminated this tree here. We've feathered it because of the linear gradient, and intersected with the color range, which took the white out and made it just focus on the blue. So color range is very handy for situations like this. And we can do the same thing again to close this in. We hit another linear gradient, go outside, shift to keep that horizon level, and drop the feather down to about there. And remember, this is all feather, so it's just going to be gradual. And let's go ahead and intersect, color range, pick an area that is a nice solid blue, and bring this refine slider out, or back to the left, so we start to take out things that are not blue. So we're just dealing with the blue, and we're going to darken that just a little bit more, and that helps close in that picture. Just those two masks, and granted they started off as a linear gradient, but I used a color range to remove the clouds. That's the difference that we've made. So now we can go in and do kind of the same thing. We're going to do a linear gradient. We're going to start it about here. Shift. We're going to come down. And let's try this. Let's intersect with a luminance range. And let's pick a bright part of the cloud. Okay, so we see here that we've still got a good bit of the blue that is involved here. This box right here indicates what we are dealing with. This over here is the feather. So I want to change that feather. And you see, as I bring it closer to that core value, we are getting rid of a lot of the sky. So let's just see how far we can take it. Okay, so we do need a little bit more feather, so we're going to do that. And let's bring the box a little bit further over. I just want to get as much of the cloud as possible, but I still want that feather for gradual. Okay, so we're still not there, so let's try subtract, and let's go to color range. And how we managed to differentiate before, let's pick that blue. And now we can refine in the other direction. And there, we've picked up more of the clouds. So at this point, let's give the clouds a little bit of clarity, which is a little bit of mid-tone contrast, a little bit of local contrast there. Let's pull the highlights down to give them a little bit more texture. Bring the exposure up. And if we take the eyeball, we're just giving the clouds just that little bit of extra pop. Not much, but just a little bit. We did it with a combination of color range and luminance range. So let's look at another thing that we can do here. We're going to create a new mask, and this time we're going to talk about the car. We're going to select the subject. And let's see what happens. Okay, so it did a really good job of selecting the car. But, get that. It does not like me when I move my mouse around. Okay, so I don't want to affect these areas that are in deep shadow because I'm going to be adding a little bit of clarity. I'm going to be adding potentially noise. I don't want to bring noise into these shadowed areas. So what I can do, I can go up here and we're going to subtract, and let's do a luminance range. So I want to get rid of the shadow areas for this particular adjustment. So I'm going to click here in something dark. And right there, you see where we're going to be affecting. And we can adjust as needed. If we want to make it a little bit less intrusive, we just do like what we tried to do with the clouds. It works much better here. So we've got a little bit of a feather here because that's getting into shadows. All of this is completely avoided. So now we can go in, we can add clarity. Again, I don't recommend that you do exposure this way because it looks odd. Add a little bit of texture. Okay, so we take the eyeball, that's without it, with subject selected and then part removed based on luminosity. That gives us the ability to do this. We are not adding anything down here, that stays in shadow. We are just adding clarity where you can see. So that's a real handy way of doing that. Now, another thing that I ended up doing, because I wanted to minimize the impact back here, is I created a new mask. I did a radial gradient. Again, it's my favorite mask, so that's why I use it so much, as just it's very functional. And we're going to come down here, we're going to do a radial, and we are going to change the feather to something like that. Now, I want to not affect the car here, so we're going to subtract, select subject, and that's going to get rid of the car. I don't want this effect to go into the sky, so I'm going to subtract color range, tap here on the sky, and now we have removed this mask here. So essentially, and we'll bring this box out of the way, I did a radial gradient, so I have a nice feather all the way around. I've removed the subject, I've removed the sky. So that just leaves this area here that I'm working with. So what I'm going to want to do is I want to bring the exposure down just a tad, not much, just to make it a little bit darker so the eyes don't gravitate back there. I want to drop the saturation just a tad. I don't want to make it black and white. That looks weird. But I want to do what I can to make sure that the eyes don't go there. Again, always remember those three things where the eyes are going to track. They're going to go to the brightest part of the scene. They're going to go to the areas with the most contrast. They're going to go to the areas with the most saturation. So by isolating this area here, and I did that with the help of the color range mask by removing that blue, I'm able to drop the exposure, make it a little bit darker, drop the saturation, drop the color intensity, and I can also bring the clarity down, which is contrast. So now, even though I have not done much, if we go up here and hit the eyeball, you see how that becomes more prominent, and then when I apply what we just did, it's less visible. It's a visual trick to direct the eyes. So that is one of the really handy things about these range masks. They are used to fine-tune bigger masks, in my opinion. That's where their strongest suit is and what I like using them with. So again, this is another good option for showing dodging and burning. So create new mask, luminance range. Go back up to the top of this stack. We're going to manually enter. I want to get the brightest part of the image. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it to where it is covering just what I want. And if you'll notice, by doing this, this is where I'm getting the highlights on the car. I'm getting the roof of the barn. I'm getting the roof back here. These are areas that I want, but I don't want to just brighten the sky. I just went through a lot of trouble to darken the sky. So I want to subtract, select sky. And there we go. Now I've got the ability to brighten these areas based on a luminosity mask, but I didn't brighten what I've darkened specifically. So we're going to go in here. We're going to dodge these brighter areas. Give it a little bit more pop, a little bit more presence. About a third of a stop. And you see the subtle difference that that makes. We can do the same thing for burning. Luminance range. Let's bring this down. And I just want to get those real dark areas. So something like that, and we're going to bring this feather in just a little bit. And you want to be careful. The closer you bring it in, the harder that transition could be. But this works. It's got a nice feather. I think it's going to blend okay, and I'm not going to do much, but we're going to drop the dark parts down just a little bit. Again, about a third of a stop. And that works out nicely. Let's look and see what we did. See? Very subtle, but it gives it a little bit more presence, a little bit more depth. And it's a quick way of dodging and burning, and it's one that is definitely worth learning. Now, here's another thing that we can do. We can create a new mask. Let's go to a color range. And let's say I want to be very specific and get kind of the redder tones. So I'm just going to do a single click on an area. Now, obviously, we've picked up a lot of stuff, but remember, we have this refine slider. So we can come back over here, and we can refine that, and we can make it just those red tones, something like that. And let's say we're going to give those a little bit of a punch in exposure. I want to give a little bit more saturation. And I might even want to change the hue a little bit by going in here to this little letterbox, popping this up, and we can start to change how this looks. Too red? Okay, move over here to more of the orange red and find where you like it. So maybe something like that. And that's based on a color range mask to begin with. And then we fine-tuned that color within. So say we're happy with that. So we've got all these masks now, and they're based in some part on a range mask, whether it be color, whether it be luminosity. They can be used independently, they can be used as their own mask, but I think that they are used in unison with others much better. So keep all of that in mind. And of course, you can go back and let's say, how do we do this one? Okay, we've got a luminance range here. Let's say we decide we want to fine tune this. We can go in and we can adjust these points again after the fact. Everything you do in Lightroom is non-destructive. You can go back, you can alter it, and that's one of the strengths. So let's kind of wrap this up at this point, and I hope that kind of shows you how to use the color range and luminosity masks. For an introduction to them, go back to the first video that I did dealing with the local adjustments. I did a two-part introduction to them to kind of show how to adjust those ranges. This is more of a functional how to use said ranges. Oh, let me do one more thing. This is something that I did and I just remembered. I'm going to do a linear gradient. What I didn't like was the pavement was reflecting too much of the blue sky. So I did a linear gradient, and again, the linear and radial are my two favorites, and this is kind of why you can use them to define a lot of areas. So I'm going to get this to where it is pretty much on the parking lot. I don't want to take the blue out of the shadow because shadows are going to be blue. So I want to subtract a luminance range, and I want to subtract these dark shadows. So there we go. And just to make sure I'm not doing anything with the car, we're going to subtract, select subject. So now we are just dealing with the pavement. We've taken this dark part out, so it's going to stay the same color, but I want to pull some of the blue of the pavement out. So I'm going to desaturate. Not much, but just enough to get the blue out. If I really wanted to counter it, I could warm it just a little bit. We can darken it down. There's a lot of different things that we can use, but remember, we've established a difference here between the shadow and the pavement based on a luminosity mask. And just that little bit that we've done, that's what we started with, that's where we're at now. Where we started, where we're at now. It's all in personal preference, it's all season to taste. Of course, I'd also come in and darken here at the bottom, close it in. We've talked about that with linear gradients, but I wanted to show another example of how this can be used as a supplement to another mask. see. So we're going to go on back. Let's see. Okay, so that brings us to a close. We're actually getting to the end of these local masks, and I'm going to have to get into the brush at some point, and that may be a two-parter. There really is a lot that needs to be said with the brush. It was kind of the do-everything mask when Lightroom first came out. All these other masks have kind of superseded it and made it better. The brush is really good, as we've seen, for adding and subtracting to other masks. It's a real quick and easy way of doing that. It's a quick and easy way of establishing certain objects. For me, though, I found that the brushes are best used for dodging and burning, and specifically when we get into editing people, retouching. I don't do frequency separation. I don't do all this other fancy stuff with layers in Photoshop. I do the old-fashioned dodge and burn. If there's a wrinkle or something on a face, I will go in and lighten the dark parts and darken the light areas around it to kind of blend that wrinkle in. It's still there. I have not removed it. I've just taken the contrast out of it so it's not as visible. And I'm hoping to get into that in a future video, but I wanted to keep it kind of simple for today, talk about those range masks, and I hope you found it useful. If you did, leave me a comment. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I've noticed that the folks that are viewing my videos for the most part are not subscribers, which is great, but I would really like for you guys to hit subscribe so that you're notified that there are new videos out, so you don't miss anything. Hopefully this whole series has been beneficial. If you have any suggestions for things that you would like to see me cover, by all means let me know in the comments, shoot me an email. I'm going to run out of kind of pre-planned material at some point. This has honestly gone longer than I thought it was going to. When I first started, I figured I'd lose interest after a few weeks, maybe a month, and here we are, I mean, 5 months later, and I'm still doing these. So pat on my back for sticking with it. Video is not my cup of tea. It's not something I necessarily enjoy. But if there are folks out there that are benefiting from it, then I'm happy to do this. If you'd like to get more in-depth and more in detail in these type of things, I do offer mentorships, and image editing is something we can do virtually. So no matter where you are realistically in the world, as long as we can communicate in some way, shape, or form, and I'm barely a single language speaker, being English, so other languages might cause me problems. But I'm happy to talk with you and set you up on some sort of custom mentorship so we can talk about image editing or other photography related things. And if you happen to be in the foothills of North Carolina, we can meet in person and we can go through anything related to photography, and I'm happy to discuss that. As I'm sure you have undoubtedly noticed, I'm happy to talk about photography related stuff ad nauseum, and probably way more than anybody wants to hear. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for today because I'm starting to ramble, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you back here again next week. So until that point, happy shooting, happy editing, and everybody take care. And let's see. Hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend. We're actually on Sunday, and I'm videoing this, so Labor Day weekend is upon us right now. So I hope you enjoyed yours, and we'll see you again here next week. Bye now.